I welcome you to the first book release event of this year, and we are delighted to celebrate the release of 1946 Last War of Independence, Royal Indian Navy Mutiny, by our founder, publisher and author Pramod Kapoor. After the immensely popular and critically acclaimed illustrated biography of Mahatma Gandhi, translated and available in 11 languages, this is his second book as an author. This book presents the most detailed and lively account of 5 days, starting 18th February 1946, when young ratings of the Royal Indian Navy mutinied. They were inspired by the heroism and daredevilry of the Azad Hind Fauj and Subhash Chandra Bose. What led to the mutiny was the appalling service conditions, racism, and broken promises made at the time of recruitment. In less than 48 hours, 20,000 young sailors took over 78 ships and 21 shore establishments in and around Bombay. This book by Pramod Kapoor resurrects the event long forgotten and ignored in our history. What it also does is revive the memory of the forgotten heroes who were part of the last war of independence. We have a small trailer made on the book. A brave and principled sailor Madan Singh joined the Navy as he wanted to see the world. As Vice President of the Naval Central Strike Committee, Telegraphist Singh was one of the fiercely patriotic ringleaders of the mutiny and worked tirelessly to unite the ratings against huge odds. We are delighted to have with us his daughter, Ms. Anurag Dhillon. Rishidev Puri, from an influential business family, was well liked for his courage and charisma. He was the first sailor to have painted subversive anti-British slogans on Arayan Talwar on Navy Day in 1946, alongside his friend B.C. Dutt. For his role in the episode, he was discharged from the Navy. We are very pleased to have with us today his daughter, Kareen Puri, his niece, well-known journalist Madhu Trehan, co-founder and editor-in-chief of News Laundry, and nephew Arun Puri, who is group chairman and editor-in-chief, India Today Group. I would like to invite Mr. Pramod Kapoor to present copies of the books to Ms. Anurag Dhillon, Ms. Kareen Puri, Ms. Madhu Trehan, and Mr. Arun Puri. Can I please invite Ms. Anurag Dhillon, please. I'd also like to invite Mr. D.N. Puri to come on stage, please. Can I please request you to please unveil the book also?
Okay.
Thank you. Can I please request Ms. Anurag Dhillon to please say a few words?
Good evening, all our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a matter of great honor for me to be called upon to say a few words about my father. Dad always said that one day, when history is written, it will be known that the Royal Indian Naval Mutiny was the immediate cause of India's independence from the British Raj. That is a very big statement. The event, as we know today, shook the British Empire to its very core. So I would first and foremost like to express my gratitude to Mr. Pramod Kapoor, the author of 1946 Royal Indian Naval Mutiny, The Last War of Independence, for taking it upon himself to haul out so much data from the long-forgotten debris of a past era that had never been examined in such detail on a factual and unbiased basis. Through his years of amazing research, he has brought to the fore the enormity and significance of this historic event. An event that up until now had been reduced to nothing but a footnote in history, as we have been told. For those who have not read the book yet, it also describes the role played by key individuals in the RIN mutiny. In particular, it describes my father, Mr. Madan Singh's role. He was younger than 25 at that time. He was the vice president of the Central Strike Committee, the committee around which the entire mutiny revolved. My father was also a fiercely independent thinker and did not belong to any political party. He often referred to politicians being as straight as jalebis. It may be remembered that he was the one who most strongly opposed the idea of surrendering on the behest of political leadership of the time. In the most difficult and critical situations, he was unfazed and had the presence of mind that made it possible for him to be in the forefront of the battlefield of events in a rather daring, yet always balanced with fairness attitude. He had courage, determination, and a great sense of purpose that catapulted his personality to a different level. He went farther than most men because he was grounded and sure of himself. He was what you call a true leader. In that spirit, his spirit was with the team, and he would place them before himself. As dad, he was strict, but exceedingly loving and affectionate, always entertaining the highest ideals for us. I would just like to end by saying that he would have been so elated and heartened to find what he might have found in this book, the revelation of the truth that was. Mr. Pramod, I would like to thank you again on behalf of my mother Pritam Kaur, my brothers Ranjit Singh, Vijay Pratap Singh, my husband Dr. G.S. Dillon, and our son Zoravar Singh. Thank you for unearthing all that you have. Thank you, everyone, for being here and sharing the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Dillon. I would now request Mr. Arun Puri to please come on stage and share his memories of his uncle, Mr. R.D. Puri.
Mr. Pramod Kapoor, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. My uncle, R.D. Puri, I get emotional with him, was an extraordinary man who lived an extraordinary life. I don't know many people who've been in their youth in the Army, Navy, and the Air Force in one shot. And he used to talk about the naval mutiny to us, and I'm ashamed to say we didn't take him seriously. And it's only after Pramod's book that I realized what an important role he played in this quite a important event, a turning point in terms of India's independence. And I'm glad that my uncle is now in the history books. I think he would be surprised or delighted, I'm not sure. He was a person who I correctly described in the book as a devil-may-care attitude, courageous, fearless. He never feared anything, and had charisma. I knew him. I went to London when I was 16 years old, and he was in London. How he got to London is a family mystery. I think he smuggled himself in part of the Indian hockey team or something like that. And he was for those about 10 years I was there studying and working, he was my guardian, in many ways my mentor. And I learned many lessons from him. One of the things he taught me, that he looked at life like an adventure. And it has its ups and downs, but never have your chin down, have always your chin up. And he had many ups and downs in his family, in his life, but I never saw him down and out. That was a remarkable aspect of him. The book says he was flamboyant. He wasn't flamboyant, actually. He was stylish, because I used to have his hand-me-down Savile Row suits. And he was always a great raconteur and a storyteller. And he had the whole family history with him. He was a great mimic. And it so happened, as destiny would have it, that his last 10 years, he lived in my home, stayed with me. And they were great times. He was a man full of stories, memories, entertained everybody, and was never a burden on anybody. So Rishi, bless your soul.
Thank you, Mr. Puri. I will now request our moderator for the evening, senior journalist and author, Sandeep Unnithan, to be in conversation with Mr. Pramod Kapoor. I invite both of them on stage.
Thank you, Pramod, for having me here. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pretty overwhelmed by listening to the stories of our brave freedom fighters, and this is a story that needs to be told again and again and again, because this was a story we were never told, Pramod. Growing up, the RIN mutiny of 1946 was a footnote in history, as one of the speakers just mentioned. And it's full credit to you, Pramod, for bringing this out, this glorious chapter, converting that footnote into this glorious chapter that we have in the form of this book. And, and before I start, I have a lot of questions to ask you, Pramod, on your journey. It's been a long journey. You've spent so many years unearthing all these stories of these forgotten freedom fighters of ours. Before I begin, I have a question for the audience. How many of you here knew about the Royal Indian Navy mutiny of 1946? Oh, that's impressive. You're preaching to the converted, Pramod.
Well, it's about 30%, I would say.
But it's still a very impressive show of hands. Remember Jaipur, there was hardly anyone who knew about.
Well, we have more evolved crowd here, I suppose.
Than Jaipur. God bless you. Now, my first question to you, Pramod, is that the mutiny began on February 18th, 1946, and it was over by the 23rd of February, 1946. It was just 5 days, and 5 days that shook the British Empire to the core. My question is, why did the mutineers surrender? When they had the advantage, they had the British literally quaking in their boots. Why did they surrender that advantage? And what would have happened if they hadn't surrendered?
Well, first of all, I must thank the daughter, Anurag, and Irene, and Arun Puri for being here. I have merely told the story of their valor, of these young men who were from 15 to 24, and they were, they were so beyond their age in what they thought, how they expressed themselves, and how they conducted themselves, and what they nearly got to India as a country. So there's nothing big that I have done. I have only narrated their story, which happens to be so powerful and which so much, bravery in it that everyone seems to like it. Now, coming to your question about why did they surrender? First of all, they were leaderless. There was no leader. That they were hoping that the politicians will come forward, that they were going to deliver a Royal Indian Navy as an Indian Navy to the country. But then nothing of that sort happened. So that was the first. They said that we are ready to fight. We are trained to fight with guns. They don't know. In fact, one of them said in a speech which he was giving to the mutineers or to the sailors, that we are trained to fight with guns. Now we are being told to fight with charkhas. How do we do that? So it was that plus I think the Sardar Patel and Maulana Azad and Jinnah were huge big figures. They grew up hearing and listening them. They found it very difficult to say no to them, and they persuaded them like good politicians, saying half-truth and saying things that they were not capable of keeping, of assuring them of what they were not capable of, because it was not there within their power. But yet they said that we'll make sure that none of you will be victimized. And it was not an easy decision for the mutineers or the ratings to surrender. They met all night. There was a deadline of 6:15 that was given to them, and they shouted at each other. Mr. Madan Singh was against surrender. He said, this is a fight. We'll fight to the end, even if we perish. The other side, who told them they were more mature, said that, look, it's a harakiri. You will die. We will all die. And at 6:13, 2 minutes before the deadline, they hugged each other, wept like children, and agreed to surrender.
And that story is, written so beautifully in your book.
Yeah.
And so in effect, you're saying that 5 days is all it took to shake the British Empire, whereas, you had a non-violent struggle that was on parallelly. So what impact did this very violent struggle, there was a lot of shooting, and there was a threat of the use of violence, that they had manned military establishments, they had, captured naval establishments, there was a ship that they had captured. What was the impact of the RIN mutiny on the Indian on our independence, or day of our independence, I remember reading in your book, you said that it was possible that the British would have left later than they had actually planned, but had it not been for the RIN mutiny. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
You see, there's no doubt about it. The mutiny started on the 18th, and they were, of course, getting intelligence from before about the unrest and so on. It started on the 18th. On the 18th afternoon itself, House of Commons, House of Lords met and decided to send the cabinet mission. Now, on the 19th morning, it was all over in the newspapers here that the cabinet mission will be arriving here in no time. Now, this may have been planned earlier, but it was the announcement was hastened because of this. There is enough evidence which I have put in the book. There were cables flying between New Delhi and Westminster with Prime Minister's office and the Viceroy. Accusing the Prime Minister accusing the Viceroy that you're not acting as fast enough. This should have been kept most immediate, and you didn't mark it. It was lying. Those kind of panic had set in, and that was one political side. The other side was that the Admiral Godfrey, who was the Cochrane, who was the field officer commanding of the Royal Indian Navy, he announced a rapid sailing of the biggest power ship they had, biggest warship they had, called HMIS Glasgow, which was anchored in Trincomalee, saying that they will save, just to threaten and scare these people. They made sure that the Royal Indian Air Force planes flew low above the ship, the naval yard, and in all respect they tried to. If this was not, and then there were admissions 10 years later, which people writing to each other in their memoir, Viceroy Wavell has written that that we could handle Gandhi's non-cooperation and non-violent movement, but we could not handle that if the armed forces had mutinied, and that we were just 5,000 or 6,000 at the time in India, and that we will be butchered. He said this is to this effect. He even wrote to authorities in. So it clearly shows that this was a big reason for the hastening of the independence.
So it's possible that the British should have left later than they had actually planned.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you think there's a case for rewriting our textbooks now? Because that's not the history that we've all been taught.
The rewriting of books are not on you and me. It is the ruler of the time. That time it didn't suit Congress people, so they revived it up. Today, if it will be written only if it is saffronized. I mean, we don't know if it will be written now.
But so, Pramod, what is the role of the political class at that time? You mentioned that earlier. One of the speakers also said that said this as well. And when I met Mr. BC that many years back, he also seemed to suggest that the mutineers had been, led up the garden path by the political class, and the kind of support that they expected from the leaders of that time was not forthcoming, and they felt betrayed. I mean, did you sense that when you were researching this?
You see, the political class Congress was also divided. The younger class, which was more towards the left, like Aruna Asaf Ali and Aminu Masani and Achyut Patel. They were supporting. Even Nehru was in between. He was supporting. Yet he like a disciplined. He called it a disciplined soldier. He would talk what the party would want him to talk. But these youngsters actually were all in support of. I can't just say that, look, this is what they should have done. But if the political class, the senior political class, had given them some direction, certainly things would have, the independence would have come earlier. But they couldn't do, because, the independence was imminent. They saw it was coming, and they didn't want it to be jeopardized. Then they also saw that they have worked for 30, 40, 50 years relentlessly on, agitating, putting their lives to risk. They couldn't get, they couldn't get them to agree to the fact that these young ratings who would take over all the jobs that they have done. So it was a complicated situation. I'm trying to simplify that as much as I can.
So it is a clash between a non-violent struggle and
yes, it was.
essentially a violent struggle.
In fact, the ratings also wanted to keep it that way. They wanted to pursue the Gandhi's peaceful nature of to go on fast and but when on the second day, when the British started to shoot outside Castle Barrack, they had to shoot in retaliation. And that's when the soldiers in them came out, And that's how it, but most of the time it was the British who killed them. They didn't kill the British, So, yeah.
So what are the stories that you came across, Pramod, while researching this?
I think,
fascinating,
the book is made of really the heroes, I mean, we have, you see, it all started on the 1st of December 1945, when for the first time, the Royal Indian Navy decided to open the gates to the public of Bombay, invited all them for all the gaiety, the fun and everything, and to show them what it was, and how liberal they were and so on. Just before that, on the 1st of December, on the night of 30th November, R.D. Puri and B.C. Dutt worked all night, painted seditious slogans on the walls of Talwar, and they were lucky that they were not caught. At about 3 o'clock, and then when in the morning, when the people came to participate, they were aghast to see everything was in shambles. So that is the beginning. These are young kids. They were, as I said, from 15, 16 to 23. Now these are the people who showed that courage. They didn't show it for food, or they didn't just show it for bad living conditions. They wanted to deliver the navy to independent India. Soon after that, on the 1st of February, again 1946. When a new commanding officer had taken over, he thought he's going to show to the brass now that he's taken over and everything is all right. He got the commander-in-chief Auchinleck to come from Delhi, and just before that night, again B.C. that went around pasting posters all over, which were seditious in nature, etc. But unfortunately, he was caught. That's when it all blew up. But I mean, this is the story of these brave, naval ratings. I have to read out a letter which I found, which actually it was so by chance that nobody knew R.D. Puri. Even in the wherever I found books, B.C. Dutt, who was a very good friend of R.D. Puri, would refer to him as Dev, because he was a Bengali. He would never write Dev. He would write Deb. Now nobody knew who Deb was, obviously it was a memoir, it was an autobiography, so he was writing more about himself then. But he said Deb is a wonderful bloke, referring to R.D. Puri, wonderful bloke. Oh, I'll miss him so much if he ever leaves, because by then he was talking about leaving. It's halfway through my research and writing that big chunk of papers came from the CID in Bombay, and I shared some with Madhu, and I said, she had once talked to me that, look, my uncle R.D. Puri was also involved he always says that he was involved in the freedom movement, and he was in the Navy. When I saw Rishi Dev Puri, I sent something. They just couldn't believe, both Arun and her, didn't believe that he was the same man. So I want to read just a letter which convinced me that, he had actually fallen in love with a woman there, So,
I'm sure he did.
she was, I used the wrong word, flamboyant, and editor had to correct it to stylish. But let's say he was a very stylish and a handsome man. So he then, wrote a letter to this girl who was Kusum's sister, whom he used to affectionately call Cuckoo Baby. Well, he said, the letter, there are two letters I'll read. He said, I'm not suited for the army under the imperial flag. My blood is for INA. And if someone can take me now, I'm out for it. Now I shall never join any force unless it is 100% our own national force. Suppose there is a war now, and I am called up again as I am still under the contract of 10 years and temporarily released, I shall not join but prefer a cell behind the imperial bars. That is one letter he wrote, and this was just soon after the mutiny. The other one which impressed me a lot, which I put here, and these are letters intercepted by the CID. He says, this is one cop writing to the other where he's quoted this letter. He said, I've got your letter. This is what R.D. Puri had written again to Cuckoo Baby. I have got your letter. My parents thought that I might play some more stunts with the Navy business if I go to Bombay, and they therefore sent Puri Saab, meaning I think Madhu's father, Puri Saab, to keep me calm here. I'm sorry to have missed that golden opportunity of meeting you and all the others. Puri Saab did not want this hungry tiger to go out of his cage just yet. I'm dying to give evidence in the inquiry commission, and I alone know how I am tied up here. He's writing from Simla to. So these were youngsters who were full of energy, full of ideas to do things for the country.
Indeed, the book is full of such wonderful stories that we've never read
I
of
have to
before.
tell you about Madan Singh ji. He was a very principled man, who would not compromise and who would, no nonsense man. Some of his acts of bravery in World War II are also listed here, which was told to me by your brother Ranjit Pender from Spain. And as I started to research more on him, there was a lot available through those papers, but a lot I got from the family. That he was a very principled, straightforward man, but yet when it came to there was on the second day of the mutiny, suddenly the sailors decided, because the Times of India, which was owned by the Britishers at the time, that they will burn this office. Because they shooed away the reporter who came and said that you've written all rubbish against us. So they all in a group went with guns and everything to the Times of India office and ghettoed it from all over. The editor, who was a Britisher, then I forget the name now, or something, he called Talwar and said, you have to do something because they are going to now burn us inside the building. And who was called upon to bring peace? It was Madan Singh, who was told. He then rushed there. Man who was full of, taking country to independence and who wanted to snatch it really from the British. He went there and talked to each one of them and made sure that they retreat from there, So it was that kind of personality. It was the sense of justice which was so important to him, So, I mean, this book is full of these kind of stories. I think you'll be sitting the whole night if I start to repeat all this.
No, well, that's interesting. Pramod, you mentioned the fact that the RIN mutiny, the last war of Indian independence, as you call it, was essentially leaderless. But you also had very bright leaders like Madan Singh. So, what about the officer class of the Royal Indian Navy? Because, at that time, you had a number of young Indian officers who had been commissioned. And in fact, two of those young Indian officers went on to play very important roles. They rose to be chiefs of the naval staff. What role did the Indian officers who were in the RIN play at that time? I mean, what was the conflict in their mind? What was their dilemma when this was playing?
Something just came concerning R.D. Puri when you mentioned Nanda. Nanda became the chief of naval staff.
Admiral Nanda was Lieutenant Nanda
at the time in 46, he deposed before the Commission of Inquiry. And he kept saying that I know exactly how all this happened. I know exactly. There was one man who was responsible for all this. So the Justice Iyengar, who was there, was the third judge in the Commission of Inquiry, asked him, why don't you then say here who they are? He said it was Rishi Dev Puri who did everything. So anyway, coming to your question about it's unfair in many ways it's unfair to analyze the role of these officers 75, 80 years later. Their first allegiance was to the force they were fighting. It was not, you could see later when they deposed in Commission of Inquiry or even later, they very clearly said that, look, we loved our motherland, but we were trained to be loyal to the force we are fighting for. They are the ones who are there who were paying their salaries, and beyond that, So I think this was there were some were overzealous. It happens in every movement that one of them who also became almost number two he was spying on each one of them. He lived above that number two, the Rivera, on Marine Drive, and he would tell them who's coming, who's going, and so that was his job was given to him, and he was doing his job faithfully. Later, of course, they were not taken, and these boys were also not taken in because till 1958, 4 successive chief of naval staff were Britishers. You could not take these people back, or you could not, obviously those who had supported them were promoted, and those who were mutinied, they could not be taken back because of that's what they say, 2 things. One, that we had these 4 subsequent Navy chiefs were Britishers. They could not have taken them, those who had rebelled against British. And then, of course, ostensibly, I thought it was a bit of a meek argument to say that, look, we want, after all, discipline in the independent Indian Defence Force also, so we cannot take them.
But at the same time, Pandit Nehru spoke out in Chowpatty and he upheld their right to revolt.
He did till he was not the Prime Minister. So when he became Prime Minister, there were letters written to him. There were letters written to Sardar Patel. There were letters later, 10 years later, written to Krishna Menon. In fact, and to say that, look, we fought for the country. We are on the street. We don't have jobs.
No pensions, no jobs, nothing. They were completely
a 2-line letter, a sort of cyclo-style letter was sent to each one of them, whoever asked for it, saying that the government has taken a decision not to reinstate any of those who mutinied, and those who actually were discharged with disgrace will not even be eligible for civil jobs in the government. Now, what is this? Tell me, what is this? Is this the assurance that they were given when they were made to surrender?
So I didn't understand that, Pramod. Why were, the INA, the Indian National Army, the soldiers who fought in the INA were rehabilitated, they were recognized as freedom fighters. Why were the RIN, Royal Indian Navy mutineers, cast out the way they were, as you just described?
I think it is very political. At the time, there was so much support for INA and Subhash Chandra Bose that the Congress Party of the time could not wash it away. But there was nobody here. They were just, young ratings who had no leaders. They were all individuals. In fact, one of them even wrote to the extent to Jawaharlal Nehru, saying, you fought like a freedom fighter. You were on the street. We fought like we freedom fighters. We were on the street. Look at you. You have become prime minister. We are still on the streets, you know. But no. There were only people, you know, there were a handful of people like Mr. Madan Singh and few other people who actually were so bright that they, you know, he became the head of Ghana Airways, started Kalinga Airways with Biju Patnaik. You know, he was a different class of man, but not everybody was that, you know, could make themselves that well-to-do, you know.
So it's literally thousands of these freedom fighters in this last war of independence that we fought were
I wish I could have the names and I would have put a list here, you know.
Right. I mean, but you've done such commendable national service, Pramod, I must say, to, you know, bring out these stories. And this is a story that, you know, like I said, this needs to be told again and again and again, simply because this is a chapter from our history we've never been taught this chapter. And we've, you know, for those of us who've covered the armed forces also, and, you know, I come from a naval background myself, but I was always told that, oh, this was just this thing over, you know, poor conditions and poor living conditions and bad food and all of that. Little realizing this is what it was. I mean, all these men were driven by the need to throw out the British. What are the stories, Pramod, that you kept out of this book? Are there many? There are plenty of interesting stories in this. Were there some stories that you had to leave out of this?
There are some which obviously I couldn't corroborate with other sources. I haven't put in here. I mean, there is Mr. Puri here, Mr. D.N. Puri, who told me some wonderful stories about R.D. Puri. Now, I couldn't have put everything because, you know.
Probably for another edition.
Well, probably for a private edition for him, I'd do it, you know.
But there's that wonderful story, Pramod, of the very David and Goliath kind of story. I don't want to spoil it for the readers, but I mean, I want you to kind of describe that moment. You describe it so well, the ship,
yes.
the Glasgow, which sails from...
Yes, that is my favorite story. But before that, I was going to say that, look, I learnt all this writing this book and researching this book. You all buy a copy of this and learn it, you know.
Pramod has done all the hard work for you, ladies and gentlemen. You just have to buy his book and
let me narrate that story, which you know, resonates with me all the time. You know, that there was this ship called HMIS Kathiawar, which is anchored somewhere in Gujarat, and when the mutiny broke out, they mutinied wherever, you know, because these ratings were from the telegraph department, I mean from the signal school. Within no time, it was all over the world. All RIN ships knew that they had mutinied, you know. So the news got to this Kathiawar, and immediately the ratings there went to the captain's cabin and you know, said, we'll either arrest you or you take the ship to Karachi, you know. If that's where the rebellion was in full force at the time. The British commander said, look, I do not take orders from anybody except my superior. I will not do anything. They actually put him in a cabin, locked him. And then they realized that there's no one who knows navigation, you know. So what do they do? How do they go to Karachi, you know? One of them came up and said that, look, I was with so-and-so and I had learned somewhat. So they navigated for a while. And then at that point of time, the news came that it's all over in Karachi, that the boys have surrendered. So they said, now it's no point going to Karachi. So then they said, we have to take it to Bombay. Now again with the problem of navigation. So they got you know, with great argument and discussion, saying we all will sink if we don't do this. One of the person from the British one of the British sailor came forward and he said, all right, I'll take you to Bombay. They came to Bombay. Now there was an order that no ship will enter Bombay, because the big warship, the huge warship with 14 guns, you know, all of them, I mean, it was the second most powerful warship of the British Navy, called HMIS Glasgow, which was stationed there to ensure that nobody would enter the Bombay waters. And here this little small ship with just 2 guns, you know, trying to, you know, to come into the waters. all the guns from the HMIS Glasgow, the warship was trained on this small little ship, and in it would have been one shot and they would have been blown. But these guys were so full of, in fact, they were shouting the Josh Malayabadi's shairi with all the, coffin, bolte hain jo wo, shroud on the head and so on, and they were so charged. They kept sailing. They said, come what may, let them blow us. As they reached face to face, they so to say eyeball to eyeball with Glasgow, the Glasgow put their guns down. Each one of them came onto the bridge of the ship and saluted this little, So that is summed up. That is what summed up the mutiny.
So Pramod, here we are 76 years later, talking about this absolutely unheard of, untold story of our freedom struggle. Now, in 2022, on the 26th of January, we saw the Indian Navy commemorate the RIN mutiny with a float. The Navy has, of course, they've named ships after the so-called mutineers. Madan Singh's name has been, commemorated on a ship. BC Dutt's name has been immortalized as well. There have been memorials established for the RIN mutiny. But this is purely a naval effort, whereas the objective of the mutineers, or the freedom fighters, as you should call them, was for a national freedom struggle. It was, and they weren't just mutinying against the Royal Indian Navy. How would you, 76 years later, as an author who's lived with the subject for so many years, how would you like this to be remembered by the country and by Indians?
Because of lack of names here, because it'll be unfair that only 5 people or 6 people who are named in the book or in the papers. If they are in the paper, they are in the books, But it's unfair to just give credit to all 6. I think it was the entire force, and especially the last 400 people who were put in Kalyan first, in the Kalyan concentration camp and given all kinds of problems, it will be very unfair. For one, we wouldn't know all who those 400 people were. So I think it's this entire episode, which has been edited out of our formal history, should be restored. 18th of February, in my opinion, should be given the same status as 26th of January.
No. So on that note, are there any questions? I'm just going to open the floor. Any questions for Pramod before you dash off to buy the book?
I'm ready to talk another hour if it makes you buy the book.
Yes, sir.
I have a question concerning
Please identify yourself, sir.
my name is Yogesh, sir. My question pertains to the aspect that was discussed about why did the Indian leadership after independence lay down the incident, rather did not fulfill the word that they had given to the mutineers that they would help them and ensure that they would get punished severely. So, did it have anything to do with the fact that Admiral Lord Mountbatten was the last Viceroy and the first Governor General? And he had an influence over our leadership. And he was one of the senior-most naval officers at that time. So, was this incident perceived more from the discipline point of view? And did that, was Lord Mountbatten in any way influential in the stance with the leadership?
You see, if the partition and the massacre that happened, if the bloodshed had not happened, it was supposed to be a very sort of happy, or for lack of word which is not coming, peaceful partition, and that it was going to be working together for a while. That is why there were, so many, not just Navy, but in all spheres of our administration and defense forces, there were British people who were helping us to transfer of power. Now, obviously, this is a very simple, answer to your question. But earlier I gave two answers. Earlier I said two things. One, that they did not want just such a big, for 30, 40 years they worked on the independence, movements and streets and bloodshed, even though Gandhi may say that it was all very peaceful. After every peaceful movement, there was a bloodshed, as a result of that, So all that, they didn't want to just hand it over to, if there was something to say that, look, it's a peaceful versus violent, the public would love the violence, to be, and they would give the credit to the people who actually were violent and violently got. So that was one. And of course, the other very weak argument was that, look, we want discipline in our independent India's force also. Now, well, they were your own people. It was not a mutiny of the armed forces. It was delivering. Yes, please. Hello, Sunil.
Could you quickly run us through the data sources for the book, one, and two, what role did the Indian Navy play in assisting you with this book? Did they talk to you about this book?
See, when I started, I wrote to the chief, and I was given a very open tour of the Western Command, what is called Angre now, which is where the castle barrack and part of it was the Talwar from where it started. So it was a fairly good, it was feeling the geography to learn history of the place. I went around and I was given all sorts of help. In fact, one of my best friend in the Navy, Shrikant Keshnur, Commodore Shrikant Keshnur, had happened as a result of him taking me around because he was the point person. So they did, but they themselves do not have that much record or did not want to keep record. It was not the Navy, it was the ruling party of the time. Let me tell you one thing, there were one of the newspapers that actually supported, very openly, fearlessly, was Free Press Journal at that time. And every day they would risk his, in fact, Mr. Madan Singh worked there for a while, and so did BC Dutt and some of them. They were very helpful. Now, when I started, I thought that would be the best paper to go to, because they were writing, everything openly and honestly. I could not find from 18 February to 25 February, that 7 days newspaper, I just could not find even in their archive or in any archive all over India, in National Archive, Nehru Memorial, nowhere that was there. Where do I find it? I find it in what is it? Wartime Museum in Greenwich, And then I mean, 3 years later, I said, look, this is what I've been relentlessly looking for, and I find it here, So that's the level to which the government went to eradicate, to wipe out everything, Did I answer your question fully, or there's something left behind? Well, the sources are enormous, I mean, anything that I could get hold of, any paper, any books, any family members, I was just loving it, So.
Yes, sir.
You see, the day of the mutiny, Sardar Patel happened to be in Bombay.
Yes.
And the mutiny leaders met him. And in India. So Sardar Patel told them that you must withdraw this agitation. It will serve no purpose. It is not good for the discipline. And they responded to his appeal and they withdrew. Is it true? Because I have read it somewhere.
Partly.
And one minute. Regarding your saying that it's only a footnote, I don't think. I also go through a lot of history books on the freedom struggle. My own book is coming next month. So there is a mention of the mutiny in almost all the books on the freedom struggle. Now you see, when you don't read the books on the freedom struggle, how will you know about it? Now how many people here know how many months and years Jawaharlal Nehru was in jail? One book says 1 minute. He was there in jail for 14 years. Another book says 9 years and 9 months. What is the truth? Jawaharlal Nehru was sentenced for 14 years
but physically he was there for 9.5 years. Only you come to know when you read the books. When you don't read the books, how will you know anything about the Royal Indian Mutiny? And let me tell you,
Sir, what's your question? You have a question?
My question is now you are calling it the last war of independence. I think this is a little exaggerated. This is a little exaggerated view, but yes, compliment the efforts put by Mr. Pramod Kapoor. It must be an excellent book. I get to buy it. I take a book home certainly, but I think to call it a last war of independence is not correct. This is my opinion.
Well, I think it was from the document that I saw, that how it had panicked everyone, and how everyone meaning the British, and there is a mention of a discussion or a talk between Chakravarti, who was the acting Chief Justice of West Bengal, actually came in, that was around 1956-57, he came. I have not put that because I could only find it in 5 sources, but not in Attlee's biography or autobiography. So that's why I haven't put it. But let me tell you, they were sitting next to each other in a banquet that was given by the governor, and Justice Chakravarti asked him, what do you think of the 1942 Quit India movement? What are the effect of that? His exact word that everybody has quoted: minimal. This is what he said, it is minimal. We were not scared of we could handle, he didn't say scared, he said we could handle Gandhi's peaceful and non-violent, but we could not we could not risk the mutiny in the armed forces. And I said that earlier, and this is what my study is, that yes, they said there were just 5,000 or 6,000 people at the time. I mean, not generally, but administratively, and that they would not be able to handle this particular thing. Had a wide support of the public, and so much so that in 3 days, 400 Bombay people were killed by the British when they came out on the streets. Yes, now the political parties say that it was all engineered by communists. You mean the communist people just came on the street to just say shoot us because we are communist? They came out because they believed in the cause of these ratings. So therefore, this is my opinion, this is my view, that yes, this indeed was the last war of independence. There was no war after this. And to answer your question, that all those who read books, I'm sure there are 70% people who didn't raise their hand, they all read books, but they haven't found a reference.
Thank you. I think we'll just take the last question there. Gentleman in the yellow.
Kapoor, just wanted to ask, in your research, did you find any reference of, say, a fear expressed of it spreading to the British Indian Army? And was there any such communication between them and because it was a much larger force, and if it had spread, it would have been disastrous?
Well, yes, 1,500 army people from the suburb, one of the suburbs, which I can't remember, they actually marched in support of the naval ratings. So that rebellion was starting. Air Force, earlier, 2 months earlier, there was some sort of a mini mutiny, you can say, and they were ready to come, and it so happened that by the time they all could join forces, these ratings were made to surrender. So yes, they were getting ready to fight together. Yes, sir.
I get the impression that most of your sources are English language.
That's true, sir. That is unfortunately true.
That may be interesting. How it was reported in Marathi press, Hindi press, and especially Urdu press. Was having a very radical
yes.
newspaper, Tara. that is for something which perhaps throw some more light on this. And also what was the actual readers of this?
You see, these newspapers were in minority because they could report what was happening. You see, in Times of India, if it says that the forces fired from outside the castle barrack, would report it as if there was a mischief inside, you know, that the ratings were actually creating mischief, therefore the British Army had to fire. Whereas Free Press Journal would do it differently, you know, they would say there was a firing and so many people got killed, you know. So that was the difference. There was no opinion expressed so much except R.K. Karanjia of Blitz, who wrote very openly, you know. And so did Saranan of Free Press Journal. But even then, they had to cut down later when Saranan, that's a famous thing about Madan Singh, that he said, I'm leaving the job because you only want to publish from handouts. And when I bring a report, you don't publish it. So at that time, Saranan came and said, look, I'm running 18 newspapers. As it is, some 10 of them have been shut. If I write this, if I publish this, all the newspapers, all my editions will be shut. I won't even have a voice for the freedom fighters. You know? But that is how. But Madan Singh, as he was, he resigned the next day. You know?
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.